The WM formation. Imagine your team is shaped like the letter W and M stacked on top of each other. That's literally what this looked like on paper. 3 defenders at the back, 2 midfielders in the middle, and 5 attackers up front. Yes, 5 attackers. This was football in the 1920s when defending was apparently optional. Arsenal perfected this under Herbert Chapman, and it worked because most teams had no idea what to do when 5 players came charging at them. It was like bringing a machine gun to a knife fight. The 2 midfielders had to cover the entire pitch, which meant they were basically marathon runners who occasionally kicked a ball. Why did it die? Because someone eventually figured out that having more than 3 defenders might be a good idea. Revolutionary thinking. Really. Catenaccio. This is Italian for door bolt, which tells you everything you need to know. If the WM formation was a machine gun, Catenaccio was a nuclear bunker. Italy in the 1960s decided that the best way to win football matches was to make sure the other team never, ever scored. Picture this, 4 defenders standing in a line like they're waiting for the bus. Behind them, 1 extra defender called a libero, who swept up anything that got through. It was like having a goalkeeper who was allowed to use his hands anywhere in his own half. Inter Milan won everything with this system because watching them play was like watching paint dry, except the paint occasionally scored on the counter-attack. Teams would have 70% possession and lose 1-0 because they couldn't break through what was essentially a human wall. Modern football killed this because FIFA changed the offside rule, and because fans threatened to stop watching if games stayed this boring. The pyramid formation. Before anyone knew what they were doing, football teams lined up in a 2-3-5 formation that looked like a pyramid. 2 defenders, 3 midfielders, 5 attackers. This was football in the 1800s, when the main tactic was kick the ball toward their goal and hope for the best. The 2 defenders were basically the last line of defence before the goalkeeper, who probably spent most of the match picking the ball out of his net. The 5 forwards would charge forward like a cavalry charge, which worked great until someone invented the offside rule. Teams scored about 47 goals per game because nobody really understood that defending might be important. It was like watching a basketball game where both teams forgot they were supposed to stop the other team from scoring. This formation died when people realised that having only 2 defenders was like bringing a spoon to a sword fight. Total football. Holland in the 1970s had a crazy idea. What if every player could play every position? What if your centre-back could suddenly become a striker? What if your goalkeeper could play as a midfielder? This wasn't football, this was magic. Johan Cruyff and his Dutch teammates would switch positions so often that opposing teams got dizzy trying to mark them. 1 minute you're marking a defender, the next minute he's in your penalty box scoring goals. It was like playing against a team of shapeshifters. The system required players to be incredibly fit and incredibly smart. You needed to know how to defend, attack, pass, tackle, and probably solve complex math problems while running at full speed. Most players today can barely remember which foot is which. Total football died because it was too perfect for this world. Also, it required 11 Johan Cruyffs, and there was only one of him. The Christmas tree formation. Someone looked at a 4-3-2-1 formation and thought, this looks like a Christmas tree. And the name stuck because football people are very creative with names. This formation was popular in the early 2000s when everyone thought having 1 striker was enough. The idea was simple: pack the midfield with so many players that the opposition couldn't get through. 4 defenders, 3 defensive midfielders, 2 attacking midfielders, and 1 lonely striker up front who probably felt like he was playing a different sport. AC Milan used this to win everything because they had players like Kaká and Andrea Pirlo who could thread passes through the eye of a needle. The single striker would get maybe 3 touches per game, but they were usually enough to score. This formation disappeared when people realised that having 1 striker against 4 defenders was like sending 1 person to fight an army. Modern football prefers at least pretending that you want to score goals. The stopper and 2 fullback system. Back in the day, teams played with a stopper. a defender whose only job was to stop the other team's main striker. He would follow this striker everywhere, probably even to the bathroom at half-time. The two fullbacks were positioned wide and were basically human walls. They didn't attack, they didn't create. They just stood there and kicked anything that moved. It was man-marking taken to an extreme, where defenders were basically assigned one player for the entire match. This system worked when football was simpler and strikers just ran in straight lines. The stopper would stick to his man like glue, and the fullbacks would deal with anyone else who dared to venture forward. Modern football killed this because attackers learned to move around and do tricky things like passing and creating space. Revolutionary concepts, really. The false nine. This wasn't exactly extinct, but the way it was originally used definitely is. The false nine was a striker who wasn't really a striker. He would drop deep, confuse the centre-backs, and create chaos in the opposition's defensive line. Hungary used this in the 1950s with Ferenc Puskás, and it was like watching a magician perform tricks. The centre-backs didn't know whether to follow him or stay in position. If they followed, they left a huge gap. If they stayed, Puskás had all the time in the world to create magic. Barcelona brought this back with Lionel Messi, but the original version was different. The Hungarian false nine was more about confusing defenders than creating goals. It was psychological warfare disguised as football. This original version died because modern defenders are smarter and better organised. Also because there was only one Puskás, just like there was only one Messi. Wing half system. Before anyone invented proper midfield positions, teams used wing halves, players who were half winger, half midfielder, and completely confused about what they were supposed to do. These players would start wide, drift inside, go back wide, and generally run around like they were chasing butterflies. They were supposed to support both defence and attack, which meant they were usually in the wrong place at the wrong time. The wing half system worked when football was slower and players had time to figure out where they were supposed to be. It was like playing football in slow motion, where everyone had time to think about their next move. Modern football killed this because the game became too fast for players to spend half the match figuring out their position. Also because specialised positions turned out to be more effective than having players who were mediocre at everything. The sweeper system. The sweeper, or libero, was football's version of a safety net. This player sat behind the defensive line and cleaned up any mess that occurred. He was like a goalkeeper who could use his hands everywhere except in the penalty box. Franz Beckenbauer perfected this role for Germany, turning defence into an art form. The sweeper would read the game, intercept passes, and launch attacks from deep positions. It was like having a chess grandmaster playing defence. The system worked because the sweeper was usually the smartest player on the pitch. He could see everything developing and react accordingly. It was like having a football prophet who could predict the future. This died because modern football became too fast and complex for one player to cover everything. Also because FIFA kept changing rules that made the sweeper less effective. Progress ruins everything. The metodo system. Italy in the 1930s created the metodo, a 2-3-2-3 formation that was supposed to be the perfect balance between attack and defence. It was like the Goldilocks of football formations, not too attacking, not too defensive, but just right. The system used 2 defenders, 3 midfielders, 2 inside forwards, and 3 attackers. The inside forwards were the key. They linked midfield and attack, creating a fluid system that could adapt to any situation. Italy won the World Cup twice with this system because it was ahead of its time. While other teams were still figuring out basic positioning, Italy had created a tactical masterpiece that balanced all aspects of the game. The metodo died because World War II interrupted everything, and by the time football resumed, new ideas had taken over. Sometimes history gets in the way of football evolution. The Danubian school. Austria and Hungary in the 1930s developed a style called the Danubian school. Football played with short passes, technical skill, and intelligence. It was like watching chess played at full speed by people who actually knew what they were doing. This wasn't just a formation, it was a philosophy. Players were taught to think, to pass, to move without the ball. It was revolutionary because most football at the time involved kicking the ball as hard as possible toward the opponent's goal. The Austrian Wunder team and Hungarian Golden team dominated international football with this approach. They made other teams look like they were playing a completely different sport. This style died because World War II scattered the players across the world and the knowledge was lost. It was like losing the recipe for the perfect cake. You know it existed, but nobody remembers how to make it. Which extinct football tactic do you think would work best in today's game? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed learning about football's forgotten tactics, hit subscribe for more Football Explainer videos. If you've got hypes left this week, use one here to push this video up the leaderboard. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.